Recap starts at 1:30. A few disclaimers before we begin. 1. I don't own anything depicted in this story summary. All music, game clips, pictures, and footage shown belong exclusively to Roope Tamminen and HypnoGames Company Inc. This is all strictly for entertainment purposes. 2. Both my available equipment for videos, and experience in making them, is limited. So parts of this video, and segments of the auto script reader will be a little rough at times. That said, I did my best to ensure the lore within will be well grounded. Essentially, I only made this kind of video because I couldn't find anyone else who had. 3. This video will just be about the quote, movies, of the Lakeview Cabin universe. For context, the most recent game, Lakeview Cabin 2, and the most recent spin-off game, Lakeview Valley, both take place in the quote, real world, whereas the plot lines we will be discussing come from the Lakeview Cabin collection, the first Lakeview Cabin related game that was released on Steam. Which are fictional films within this video game universe. Okay, that covers that. Now on to the recap. The story begins in the 1800s, with a maid who lived to the west of a great lake, and worked for a wealthy man by the name of Red Sr. Red Sr. was the owner of a local factory, and a sprawling estate. He was either fully part of, or at least had some kind of arrangement with a prominent cult in the area, that worshipped the lake gods, who supposedly resided under the expansive waters. The factory created items like toys, and playing cards. Things that would, eventually, lead to items like Halloween masks, Ouija boards, and cable boxes, all the products branded by the symbol of the cult. Despite the, perhaps charming nature of his business, Red Sr. was as ruthless as he was rich. It is unclear if in this shown moment is Red assaulting E, or if this is a consensual encounter. However, what is clear, is the tormented spirits of those that Red Sr. had brutalized in the past. It should be noted here that the quote, Red Sr. depicted in the next few scenes is a little different from the man we see in the portrait and films to come, but that is explained later. No matter the nature of the sex between them, Red Sr's undesirable character is made plain as he, upon later discovering that he was bearing his child, took the maid out into the woods, and shot her. He miraculously survived this, but lost her child. Heartbroken, she buried its remains under the tree she was shot under, and traveled north to seek out the lake gods. Now, Red Sr. had made two mistakes that day. Not only did he fail to kill E, but he failed to realize that she was part of the very cult he had his arrangement with. The cult was furious with Red, and retaliated. It is unclear exactly what transpired, but a few things are known for sure. First, Red Sr. is ruined, and mortally injured. However, with the last of either his strength or resources, he burned down the factory, and cursed the lake so that there would never be peace for as long as his bloodline survived. Second, his descendants, likely the offspring from all of his assaults, become the permanent residents of the desecrated mansion, and began a disgusting cycle of cannibalism, and incest. Red was able to craft one last means of contacting the world beyond the grave, but more on that later. Finally, Red Sr's death was used as an element to the ritual he was about to perform, as evidenced by his top hat placed prominently in a ritualistic circle, as seen in a vision in the Lakeview Cabin 2 or epilogue chapter. With vengeance enacted against Red, he sought to regain what she had lost. To appease the gods so that they might grant her this power, he sacrificed both of her brothers, and another family's infant under the blood moon. She was then deemed worthy, proclaimed to be the saint mother of the cult, and then he allowed herself to be willingly absorbed into the stone sarcophagus. This action would spread her consciousness beyond what a normal human would otherwise be capable of. Between this and Red Sr's curse, another cycle of horror of which the world had never seen before would begin. The cult then placed a gravestone in the woods in their saint mother's memory. Fast forward to the early 1900s. A man by the name of Walt, as we can loosely infer his name to be based on some of the material seen in the second chapter of Lakeview Cabin 2, had been enjoying some family time at his personal wilderness getaway. When he became suspicious of his wife, who bore a striking resemblance to E, when she threw a key into the lake. Overcome with curiosity, he jumped in to try and find it, only to suffer a terrifying vision, and woke up in bed the next day. His wife appeared oblivious to the matter, if not eerily serene. Walt's mental stability dwindled as his week became a chain reaction of leaping into the waters, seeing visions of cults, horrors, and his wife murdering him, and then waking up the next day as if nothing had happened. Walt eventually suffered a mental breakdown, and decided to kill his wife before she could kill him. Upon carrying out the deed with the firewood axe, Walt steps into the waters once more, only this time he sees a vision of he and his wife, happy together in their old age. Now completely insane, Walt threw the remains of his wife into the lake, took up the axe again, and this time killed his 2 children. He recorded all of these events in a manuscript, titled Lakeview Cabin. This manuscript would later be used to make the motion pictures seen in the games, the plot of which we are discussing now. At this time it's good to point out that this part of the story is a real-life event, but also, technically, the film Lakeview Cabin 2, a film created as a prequel to the original Lakeview Cabin movie. We know that both of these seemingly conflicted points are true, as Walt and his manuscript are seen in the real world in the second chapter of the Lakeview Cabin 2 game, not film. But it is also a movie within the real world, evident by the outline of the removed 2 on the movie theater outside in the Lakeview Cabin collection HUD level, and that the theater door that leads to the episode is directly before the entrance to the Lakeview Cabin 3 film. Albeit with no posters. We can even draw further evidence in the first episode of the game, again, not film, Lakeview Cabin 2, where we can see a deliberately removed poster in the film director's basement, once again, right before the Lakeview Cabin 3 film poster. This movie was pulled from cinemas right before its showing as part of a retro horror fest. It isn't clear if this is because the film was a banned reenactment of real events, a snuff film, or something in between. This is also why there are inconsistencies, like how Red SR's hat is being used in the ritual in one of Walt's visions, but was found sealed away in his panic room in Lakeview Cabin 4. Either way, it was not meant to be shown, and was very, very real by comparison of the other films. That said, this is still a focused summary of the in-universe film plots, and not the world around it, not yet at least. For now, the important part is that this was the film that was next in the chronological order of the plot. The time is now, roughly, the 1950s, and the great-grandson of Red Sr., who we will just refer to as, just, Red from now on, seemingly enjoys a simple getaway at his Lakeview cabin. The classic setup, to the ever-present sinister story. You see, despite being the father of 2 children with another on the way, Red is alone on the island, with the supposed boat wreck stage just off the docks, and the ghostly image of his wife, once again in the image of E, appearing, and tormenting him. We learn that Red, while on what was doubtless supposed to be a romantic getaway from the kids, turned into a homicide. Whether a rage-fueled accident, or a maliciously planned attack, E was killed and dumped into the lake. Red remained on his spot of land to drink, peep on some beachgoers, enjoy the sauna, and ultimately process what he had done. However, the visions become too vivid, and he begins to lose his grip. In an attempt to shoot at one of the apparitions, Red killed one of the girls on the beach. He then set traps around his cabin, and lied in wait. Eventually the bloated, zombified E reared up from the lake and attempted to drag him into the depths. Red fought back though, and chopped her body up. It wasn't over though, as the fetus of Red's unborn child, popped up from E's corpse, and nearly killed Red with sharp teeth, and inhuman strength. The man, however, finally managed to throw the creature into the wood stove, and set it ablaze, before he fell to his knees. But then, as the creature cried in pain, something came over Red, and he pulled its charred form from the fire. He returned it to the lake, and knew that if it could bring his wife back from the dead, it could save his son. Fast forward again, it's now the 1970s. Red has raised the fetus into what eventually became the Babyface Killer. Despite its monstrous nature and form, Red dotted on Babyface, dressed him as an infant, and got him a mask with flushed cheeks, and a painted-on binky. It was a stark contrast to how he acted towards his other children. To compensate for his regular absences, Red forced both of his children to attend a local camp, one where he had, perhaps met, or at least commemorated his relationship with E, based on the carvings on the restroom walls. His daughter became quickly callous towards Red, and focused on growing up, and separating her life from his as quickly as possible. Red's eldest son, on the other hand, constantly craved his father's attention and approval. He didn't understand all the implications of the abandonment he now faced, and spent many days crying alone at the camp. However, one day, through a shimmering door, Red Jr., as we'll call him, was visited by none other than the spirit of Red Sr. from the future, who gave to him a box that made the boy smile, and find some semblance of comfort. In the present day, Babyface's thirst for blood was unquenchable, and Red soon realized that he would not be able to contain it to the mere corner of the lake he considered his home. So he purchased the local campground he had forced his children to attend so many times, and used both his foul temper and scare tactics to drive people away from the camp. His attempts were not successful though, as Babyface murdered a child that had been attending the camp. The grounds were temporarily shut down, but due to a lack of leads, it was opened up for the summer season the next month. What was more, Red's daughter, unknowing of her father's ownership, had decided to attend as a counselor with a group of her friends. Red Jr., meanwhile, was nowhere to be seen. Neither Red or his daughter had seen so much as a glimpse of him in years. Red frantically tried to scare off the group of teens, as he knew Babyface wouldn't pass up the opportunity to attack them at nightfall. His efforts failed, and the counselors found the evidence of those that had encountered Babyface before, and realized they were in peril, and that their only option was to fight. So they set their traps, and after a brutal fight, they managed to, once again, burn Babyface to a crisp, and render him to dust. Red, who witnessed this, was maddened with grief, and attempted to kill everyone, including his daughter, with a machete. His daughter would get the better of him though, and killed Red with his own shotgun. It seemed like everything was over, until the ghostly image of E appeared once again at the edge of the docks. When the counselors drew too close, she took on a horrifying appearance, and went on the attack. The quick-thinking counselors, however, had already found the box, which Red Jr. had accidentally left behind the last time he had been at the camp, and threw it at her. The box ends up trapping E's spirit inside, which finally brought an end to the fight. Around the same time as Lakeview Cabin 3, as it were, a local band ran out of gas on their way to a concert, and ended up stranded in front of Red Sr.'s old mansion. Here, the band members have to fight the inbred, cannibalistic descendants, and their horrifying human rat hybrids, in order to make their escape. In the process, they discovered the remains of Red Sr. in his panic room, with a strange code scratched into the floor, and a box that contained his final note to the world. The band finally managed to escape, but the blood that was spilled in order to do so caused a change, as the old stone sarcophagus, buried deep below the earth, began to glow with an awakened power. As time went by from these events, we learned that Red Jr., after his father's purchase of the camp, waited patiently in the basement for his father's return. But because of Red's death, this never happened. To pass the time, He played a couple of old Atari-like games Red himself had developed. This is known as the developer of the game confirmed that the phone number on the Lakeview Lamia game manual causes the phone in the abandoned house, aka Red's house, to ring. It's possible Red worked for, or even inherited, the same company that his great-grandfather owned. Even though the factory back in the 1800s was burnt down, products bearing the cult symbol kept showing up. In any event, the house is reclaimed by the bank in light of Red's death, although it isn't realized that Red Jr. is still living there. The man fell into madness, and eventually made contact with the demon, who granted him power, but at a cost. Red Jr. returned to his basement, and began to play endless rounds of Lakeview Lamia and Super Dad. After he lost one round too many of Super Dad, Red Jr. broke his gaming console, donned the Happy Dad mask, another cult-based product, and went out on homecoming night to conduct a killing spree. A group of teenagers end up getting roped into the night of supernatural killings, investigation, death, and resurrection. Eventually, they call upon the same demon to strip Red Jr. of his mask, the ghost of a past killer, who apparently murdered children within the town of Lakeview in the 1950s, if that's important, to injure him, and then finally a fragment of herself, the remnants of her saint mother life. To strip him of his power, and turn him back into the small, crying child he had always been deep down. During this escapade, the teens also found an old box in Red's attic that belonged to Red Sr. The story of the cannibal family the band had fought against had made headlines, which allowed the box and portrait of Red Sr. to be discovered in the first place. So the teens used the code they had heard about to open the box, and with it portal to the underside. From here, they obtained the first box, the one that now contained the spirit of E, and in the process, enabled the spirit of Red Sr. to be momentarily freed from his torment by the demon, to travel into the past, and give the same box, only empty, to Red Jr., thus ensuring the cyclical paradox. In present day, the teens gave the box that contained to Red Jr. The boy has a touching reunion with his mother, before they both vanish into the sky in a large pillar of light. All seems well, until the truth of what this implied for the earth came to pass. This led to the opening of Lakeview Cabin 6. All the bloody events, and strange awakenings of power came to a cataclysmic head, and the earth was split in two. The ever-present cult was still at work though, only this time they've upgraded from factories and toys, to a large-scale research company and space station. The origin of the world-ending power outburst was traced to Lakeview, more pointedly, the lake water, the cabin, and the sarcophagus itself. The CEO of the company is determined to harness this power, and make his dad proud. Thus, the facility collected an assortment of relics, some of which included the preserved bodies of the people and animals who witnessed these events. A breakthrough occurred as the scientists discovered the regenerative properties of the water, and hosted a party to celebrate. However, an alien parasites got loose in the station, and wreaked havoc. A team of janitors freed Red's daughter, who had been kept in a cryogenic status. She is frightened at first, but, when she is given the teddy bear used to help her in her fight against her brother, Babyface, she calmed down, and agreed to help. So the team evacuated the people aboard the station, and killed the aliens, but were then confronted by the image of E, who rapidly mutated into a horrifying monster. With significant firepower, this too was defeated, and the janitors, plus Red's daughter escaped as the facility blew up, thus destroying the cabin, sarcophagus, and lake once and for all. At the refugee station, the CEO showed up to greet his rescued crew. Little do they realize though, is that he arrived with the intent of gunning them down. At the last moment though, the CEO realized that there were more people in the room than bullets in his gun. So he was forced to keep on a cheery smile, and watch as they all left in safety. There are a few theories about what all this means. First, it is clear that the CEO is a descendant of Red. Second, it's clear that he either wished to cover up the incident that happened aboard his station, or was involved with the alien outbreak. But which was it? And what kind of descendant is he? It's all up to interpretation. But personally, I think that the CEO is Red Jr. Consider that Red Jr. was turned into a child at the end of Lakeview Cabin V, and remained that way as he was teleported away, seemingly into the sky, by E. Next thing you know, the world blows up, and E ends up in space. 20, maybe 30 years pass, and you have a Red descendant CEO who is now also running a space-based operation. Yet, despite the gap in years, it is clear the CEO has an adoration for his father, more than that, a strong desire to make him proud. This is within the character of Red Jr., who always felt abandoned by his father, but always sought to be like him nevertheless. I believe that despite their reunion, the CEO, or Red Jr. as it were, and E eventually became at odds, as the curse tends to make happen. Red Jr. wanted to be like his father, make him proud, and obtain the power he considered his inheritance, while E vengefully fought against the bloodline and its works. The discovery of how to harness the power must have prompted E's aggressive, and downright suicidal attack. Likewise, now that Red Jr. gained at least an element of the power, again, as evidenced by the ghostly image of Red appearing over his face, he wants to work with a clean slate. So he made the move to kill any survivors so that 1. He didn't slip a parasitic alien face burster past him. And 2. There would be no one to tell the tale of the entire encounter. Red Jr. would be free to use his power however he desired, with no chance of his mother interfering. But of course, he's unable to do this. The Red bloodline would continue, and he could only be assumed dead, again.